Are you Invictus? Clint, are you Invictus? Are you Invictus?
What does it mean?
You know, when I started the Invictus Mind podcast, my goal was to unite a bunch of people who had a similar ideology or similar characteristic traits. Invictus means unconquerable. It's an old Greek word for it means unconquerable.
Unconquerable.
Honestly, just be totally honest, it was a new concept to me. I had to Google it when you sent it to me. But yeah, I do my best.
Tell me about what the show. What is your audience looking for? Tell me.
This is your first time here. This is the #1 program dedicated to helping individuals maximize their potential and truly become unconquerable. Here we have discussions about what it takes and what it means to experience and magnify political freedom, financial freedom, and spiritual freedom.
Yes, I would absolutely say that. I'm going to keep getting up, right? And I keep getting up and I keep pushing forward. And that's the type of mindset that you need to have.
I never lose hope. I never lose faith. My mindset has always been, if I want something, I don't give up. So let me tell you what is the #1 issue when it comes to being unconquerable.
Okay.
And the #1 word you have to think about here is not intelligence, not savvy, not strength, none of those things. The #1 thing is resilience.
You know I'm Invictus. Come on. All right, I'm Invictus AF.
Well, Matt, I have an initiation question for my tribe.
Okay.
Are you Invictus?
I believe I am.
So yes, I agree. I am Invictus.
I totally agree, man. And I think that if there's anybody on this planet that's unconquerable, it's probably me. I am not the type to take orders, and I am definitely in a position that I can stand up for myself right now. So.
And I was like, no way, I know what that word means now.
Yeah, man, very cool concept for a show.
You didn't ask me if I was Invictus.
Well, hello, everyone, to another episode of the Invictus Mind podcast, the show where every discussion pertains to how to acquire, maintain, and magnify your political freedom, financial freedom, and spiritual freedom. This, of course, is your host, Mike Corbell, and I'm happy to be here. Today, we're talking to a gentleman who says he has led an incredible life and is always happy to share it with people. I, of course, reach out to him via podmatch.com, which, of course, is a great resource for fellow podcasters and guests who have a message to share and wanted to connect with each other. I am an affiliate with podmatch.com, so I'll put the show notes at the bottom of the podcast here. And if you are interested in joining up, then it's a great resource. All right, so here's what I'm going to tell about today's guest. He definitely has an interesting story to tell, and I'm going to let him share most of that with us. But what I found very interesting is that he spent his career in the British Army, starting as an infantry soldier and later became a psyops operator with 7 operational deployments. He also is an experienced rugby player, a competitive skier, a hang gliding instructor, and an offshore sailor who has made numerous circles around the British Isles. On top of that, he is a podcaster himself, the host of the Tim Heale Show, where he gets to talk to ordinary people who have extraordinary stories. His name is Tim Heale. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me on your show.
So
I think you just told them what I've done.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can fill in whatever I missed.
Well, I can elaborate a little bit. How's that?
Well, great. I see that you have a strong British accent, and before we started recording, you told me that you are talking from your home in England right now.
Yep.
So we get people all across the world on this podcast, and that's why it makes this whatever you want to call podcasting a hobby, a career, something fun to do. It's always a very interesting thing.
Well, for me, it's kind of a hobby that's kind of taken over a little bit. Particularly since we got into lockdown, and that's just blossomed now to what I do. So I say Podmatch has been pretty awesome for me. To be honest, it has opened up the world, and I've talked to so many interesting people. It just makes my life look a little bit boring at times.
Well, I agree with you, and I think a lot of people had to make that necessary adaptation when lockdown occurred. And on this show, I talk to people who have been able to overcome such obstacles, whether it's of their own doing or outside influences, as we see what happened with the lockdown. But somebody like myself who's gotten into podcasting and is it a full-time operation for you now?
Well, pretty much. It's kind of taken over slightly.
But you started your career in the British Army.
I did. At the tender age of 16, I joined the British Army.
Okay.
And prior to that, I was an Army cadet, and just before that, I was a Sea Cadet. So at the age of about 10 and a half, I became a Sea Cadet, and I did that for about 18 months before, because I was just a little bit too young to join the Army Cadets. So I wanted to go into the Army, so the Army Cadets was the way forward. So I did a bit of time as a little sailor, and then moved on to the Army Cadets. And at the age of 16, I actually joined the British Army as a junior soldier at the Depot, the Queen's Division, a place called Bassingbourne Barracks in Royston in Hertfordshire.
Okay.
And I started off in the Royal Anglian Regiment. And that's where I finished up my career, in the Royal Anglian Regiment, some 44 years later.
Let's see. Now, so I have never served in the U.S. military. My brother has, but is it a voluntary army in England then, or is it a mandatory service?
No, we gave up national service back in I think it was about 1962, thereabouts.
Okay.
When people had to do their 2 years. But no, for me, it was purely volunteer. It's a volunteer army, which probably makes us the best army in the world. We don't always get it right, but when we do, we're pretty good at it. Okay.
And what was it about the armed forces that compelled you to join? Did you have family members who were also in the service, or it was just a love for your country? What was it?
I didn't want to go to jail.
Okay. You're going to have to expound on that one.
It could have gone two ways for me. I could have ended up in prison, or joined the army. I was hanging around with pretty rough types at the time. Although I was an army cadet and had that kind of discipline, it kind of gave me the right steer to mug these geezers off, most of which ended up in jail, and I ended up in the British Army and never looked back. So I left my hometown of Hatfield in Hertfordshire at the tender age of 16 and never really went back.
Okay. Yeah, I suspect that path is probably for a lot of misguided youth, if you would, where if they're hanging around with the wrong people, they have limited options. And so you might as well get some discipline and hopefully, if you're interested, make a career out of it.
Yeah, I certainly did that. I've had some pretty fun times at it and taken one or two liberties along the way, shall we say.
Okay. So now, obviously, I want to respect, your age and everything like that. But you mentioned that you were serving for 44 years.
Yeah.
Now, what were some of the major conflicts that you were involved with? You said you were on 7 operational deployments. What was that?
Well, I started out. My first operational deployment was in 1977 in Northern Ireland. I was in a place called the Ballykelly or the Ballymurphy, not Kelly, that was later. The Ballymurphy in West Belfast, which was a pretty rough time back in 77. A Company area, I was in A Company of 2 Royal Anglian. We had a pretty tough tour. We had some form of major type of incident every day for 6 months. It was pretty tough going. I mean, we had bomb attacks, we had shootings, we had riots.
Wow.
So many riots you wouldn't believe. One day I stopped half a house brick with my head.
Oh my gosh.
That hurt. but yeah, we had rocket attacks, and yeah, it was a tough tour. We lost a couple of guys, which didn't help. And then I went back to Northern Ireland after we spent 2 years in Berlin, from 1978 to 1980, and then from 1981 to 82 we were in Londonderry in Northern Ireland, and that was again a pretty rough tour because we were there during the Falklands War, and it was, although the Falklands War was pretty tasty, and that was 40 years ago, it was pretty grim in Northern Ireland at the same time.
Sure,
and then in later years I did 2 tours of Kosovo. I did Macedonia, which was only a 90-day op. And during my tour in Macedonia, 9/11 happened. 5 months later, I found myself in Kabul. And that was the first of my 3 tours of Afghanistan, and I absolutely loved it.
Okay.
Afghanistan is an awesome country. And in 2002, I had a really, really good time in Kabul. I had a little bit of freedom to be able to get out and do pretty much what I needed to do, just with myself and an interpreter. We were able to go out on the streets of Kabul. I was able to interview people. We came up with a concept of a tri-language newspaper called the ISAF News. It changed its name a little bit later, but it carried on in the same format that we'd put together at that time. So it was a kind of broadsheet newspaper with good news in it. So we had a news articles on the front page. We had a features article page, and then we had a sports page as well. So we covered sort of some local sport and international sport. So it's just like a normal tabloid sort of newspaper, but it was in 3 languages. I had a chance to interview Hamid Karzai, who became the president. I also at that time interviewed Ashraf Ghani, who was the Minister of Finance, who later who took over from Hamid Karzai as the president. I interviewed the Minister for the Hajj, and the Hajj is the pilgrimage. I can't even say the word.
Pilgrimage.
That'll do. To Mecca.
Okay. Okay.
So that was quite an interesting chat I had with him, because they were trying to get lots of people to go off to Mecca that particular year, because it just kind of opened up for them to do it, and we were facilitating the route from Kabul to Riyadh, so they could go to Mecca. And then I went to Iraq in 2004, which was I didn't really like Iraq much. I had a really tough job to do there. My role, I was a psychological operator at the time, and the task that I was given was to come up with a campaign to enhance the perception of the Iraqi police service to the local population. Okay. The fact that the Iraqi police service for decades under what's his face? Can't remember in a minute.
Saddam Hussein?
Oh, no, Saddam Hussein. That's told when you're getting old, you see your brain starts to fail on you.
Hey, you experience all that stuff. I just know from the tabloids and from the newspapers the names of these characters. So
yeah. So good old Saddam Hussein, his police service wasn't the best. They were corrupt and all the rest of it. And to try and come up with some sort of campaign for the locals to trust them a little bit was pretty much a hide into nowhere. During that tour, I was about 4 months in. I managed to get up to Kabul, up to Baghdad, I travelled all around southern Iraq. We were based out of the airport in Basra. Used to go into Basra City occasionally. We used to go up to Asamwa, where the Dutch were. We were in Nazaré with the Italians. Over in Alamara, where the Brits were. So I managed to get around quite a bit. We used to go down to Kuwait once a fortnight to get some stuff printed up and stuff like that. So I managed to get around quite a bit. But about 4 months in of a 6-month tour, I got a message one day to go and see the Padre. Thought that's weird. I don't normally talk to a God brother. And he called me in and he sat me down and said, we've got a problem. You have to go home. Well, yes, your wife has been diagnosed with cancer and she starts her treatment on Monday. This is Friday afternoon. Wow. He said, go pack your kit up. You're on your way home. Well, that was the worst 24 hours of my life.
I bet it was.
It's just what was going through my mind. I mean, just packed all my kit up, and I was flown out civvy, and that was it. I got home, had a hell of a weekend, and on the Monday we went to the Wooden Spoon unit in Stoke Mandeville Hospital in Aylesbury, and she started her treatment, and then. At the end of the treatment, they said, well, if you stay clear for 2 years, you'll be fine. Anyway, a year and 11 months later, it came back. The cancer came back and she died within about 6 weeks. And that was in 2006.
That was
2006.
That was the end of your military experience then?
No, that was the end of my wife.
Okay, well, yeah, and I'm sorry to hear that.
I mean, I carried on serving.
Okay,
but I didn't deploy out again while she was ill. But I carried on working at the base. I was then on a training team that was training up guys for pre-deployment training to go to at that time Iraq, and then in 2005 we started going back into Afghanistan. So I was training up guys to go to Afghanistan, and obviously she died. A couple of months later, I went out to Afghanistan again, down into Helmand province.
Okay.
So, didn't have an awful lot of time to get over or to grieve, really, and just get on with the job.
Gotcha.
So I spent 6 months in Helmand province and had a pretty good time. I really enjoyed that tour because it was a bit of a shooting war. This is before they started sticking in all the IEDs and stuff like that. So occasionally I was able to get out on a patrol. My role was predominantly radio, and I came up with producing radio programs to send out to for the locals to listen to. And so I'd go out and I'd interview village elders and stuff like that. And we came up with a program, a serial type program called the Afghan Archers. Well, here in England, we have it's the longest running radio serial program that's in history, which is called the Archers. And that's been going for, I don't know, 70 years, something like that.
Really? Okay.
Yep. So we came up with a similar sort of idea, talking about locals, and if there was an incident went off in the market, then we'd try and incorporate that into the program. So I was recording and editing in Pashto predominantly. I don't speak the language.
Gotcha.
So it was full of challenges, but I mean, I had a great time. We're out on one particular patrol. We got dropped off by helicopter. My patrol kit for going out on a foot patrol I managed to weigh everything that I carried going through Bastion before we went out on this operation, and all up weight, I was carrying 42 kilos of kit.
Oh,
that's a lot. That's 42 kilos. That's about 90 pounds of kit, something like that.
Yeah.
Most of it was ammunition and water, to be honest. There was very little else. There was a day ration pack and ammunition and water. When we were out in this particular village, the helicopter dropped us off, cleared off, and it was due to come back about 8 hours later. Unfortunately, the comms had gone down and we couldn't get anything once the helicopter had gone. We was only sort of 20 minutes, half an hour into the patrol, and we got opened up on by the Taliban. 9 hours later, we managed to break off the contact, having finally got some comms, and they came in and dropped a couple of 500-pound bombs on what was left of the Taliban that was attacking us.
Wow.
Fortunately, we didn't lose anybody at all on that day. How, we have got no idea. Somebody was looking after us, but they certainly weren't looking after the Taliban.
Right. I gotcha. So, I remember back in 2001 at 9/11 here in the United States, shortly after that, there was a lot of sentiment about foreign invasions and, foreign military excursions. And especially when the United States decided to go to Iraq, that's when there was an even greater divide. What were the sentiments like in England around the same time? Because America, obviously, if you were a Republican, you thought one way. If you were a Democrat, you thought a different way. Obviously, you still do in these days, but it was much more divided, particularly on a war issue, whereas like today in 2022, that's not even an issue anymore. What was the sentiment like in England?
Pretty much the same, I guess. I mean, Tony Blair was accused of all sorts of things at the time, and a lot of stuff that they were coming out with him and Bush didn't quite add up to what the reality was. I mean, we went to war in Iraq under false pretenses, a lot of people thought, and with a bit of hindsight, he didn't really have weapons of mass destruction. There was a lot of talk at the time that Bush knew that they had weapons of mass destruction because the Americans had sold it to them in the first place, but they couldn't find them, and I think that's the problem there. But there was an awful lot of ill feeling at the time. From a soldier military point of view, we just do as what we're told.
Right.
For me, I wouldn't want to go back to Iraq. It wasn't one of my favorite places. I did really enjoy the role that I was doing, although I did get out and about to see a lot of the country. It's not one of the nicest places. It's nowhere that I would like to go back to. It's not somewhere I want to go on holiday to. Afghanistan is.
Now, see, that's interesting to me because I've heard a lot of people say that, obviously nobody wants to be inside an engaged fight or in war, and a lot of military people are skeptical about some of the powers that be. But like you said, they have to do a job. That's what they're commissioned to do. But the fact that you liked your time in Afghanistan, because of the job you had, rather than when you were in Iraq, the job that you had, you didn't care for. Was it more than just the military job? Was it the people were different? Was it the weather? I mean, I don't really know much about that part of the world, obviously, but
I mean, Iraq, the time I was there, we got there, it was in the high 20s. Okay. And when I got pulled out, it was in sort of the high 40s. Okay. So the temperature, it was pretty flat and barren. I didn't find the people particularly nice. They weren't overly friendly. I went to a few places that had a really odd feeling about them. There's a place called Al Kabir, where in the year before where we went in, there was 6 Royal Military Police that were killed in this particular village, and that particular village had a very, very funny feel to the place. I mean, you go into it and sort of hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and you feel like you're not safe in this place. Everybody's out to sort of have a chance of having a go at you if they can.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't one of those places you want to go back to. But there you go. It's what it is. It's part of the job, and that's what I did.
Right.
I was quite pleased when I came out. I didn't even have a chance to do a handover. I just had to drop everything, pack my kit. I was flown out within days. So yeah, it was a pretty miserable experience, the whole thing.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that you were doing in Afghanistan. You liked it because of the profession that you had at the time, and you were doing a lot more journalism and broadcasting type of work there. And obviously those skills have carried with you to your podcast today, and some of the other experiences you have. But you mentioned earlier that you were writing a lot about sports and stuff, activities, and you're somewhat of an athlete yourself, correct?
Used to be.
you were a professional rugby player, right? Or was that just your game of choice?
That professional bit's a bit of a thin line. I guess the professional bit came from I was being paid because I was in the army. I was playing playing on a Wednesday afternoon generally, or is when the army tend to have their sports. So I used to play a lot of rugby on a Wednesday afternoon, and I used to play for a local team as well. And I used to play for our veterans team, and so yeah. So use that term professional fairly loosely on that.
Well, that's fair enough. But, so here in the United States, rugby is not as popular as it is in other parts of the world. But, I from my estimation, rugby is a real man's sport. So,
proper man's sport. Yeah.
A proper man's sport. There you go. So
that's it.
But, so again, being the ignorant American that I am at times, just I say jokingly, but so rugby. What was some of the positions you played in rugby? What were your position? Was it scrum? What does scrum mean?
I only ever played at scrum half.
Okay,
which is the guy that gets the ball and puts it into the scrum. So you've got the 8 guys on each side. They come together. So you've got a front row of 3. Then you've got the 2 locks behind them, and then you've got the flanks, and then you've got the number 8. So you've got 8 guys going together like that on each team. And I was the guy that puts the ball in. And then I'm the one that chases the ball around and passes it out to either give it to the forwards or pass it to the backs. So I'm the link between the number 8 and the number 10.
Okay, is that just more of an offensive position then?
No, it's an all round. You don't have offense and defense in rugby. You have the ball, you're attacking. If you haven't got the ball, you're defending.
Gotcha.
So, but it's not like everybody goes off on the sidelines and watches the other side half of the team play. You're on there for a good 80 minutes.
80 minutes. That's how long the game is? Oh, wow.
Yeah, 80 minutes, two 40 minutes halves. And the adage is that footballers, soccer players run around for 90 minutes pretending that they're not pretending they're injured. And rugby players run around for 80 minutes pretending they're not.
I like that. That's why it's a proper man's sport. Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. But on top of rugby, you were also a skier as well. I won't say professional unless that was the case, but you were in some competitions, right?
Well, you could say again, I was a professional telemark race skier.
Okay.
The fact that I was doing it, getting paid to do it by the army, makes me a kind of a professional. But yeah, I skied for the army for quite a few years. I was on the first army team that took on the Royal Navy. And we won. So we were going up against Royal Navy and the Marines.
I got you.
An army team, and we were pretty good.
Okay.
And I skied for a lot of years. We used to go to a place in Austria called Rauis, where the British Telemark Championships took place, and that was generally run by the army. And we had the honour of being the first British team to run an international FIS championship, world championship race at Telemark. So Britain has never run an FIS championship race ever.
What is FYS?
FIS.
FIS.
Yes, French.
Okay.
Federation Institute, something or other. I don't know. My French is fairly limited. But,
I gotcha. Well, very cool. And then I'm jealous of this one, that you were a sailor and you were able to navigate around the British Isles a few times.
Well, I've done a little bit more than that as well. I've always, since I was a saucepan lid in the sea cadets as a seaweed, I've always been messing around on boats of one sort or another all my life.
Yeah. Okay.
And I used to take guys sailing. So I got my sailing experience through the army. So I got all my qualifications through the army, and I used to plan out expeditions. So I used to take guys up to Germany, a place called Heale in Germany, which is in the north of Germany. And we used to take out boats and sail around Denmark. I took 66 people on 10 boats on an expedition to Croatia. So we took 66 guys sailing in Croatia, which was great fun. And I had my own boats. I've had 3 boats in my life. My last boat, when I retired in 2018, the first place we went, we took her up to the Baltic, and we sailed around. We sailed from the UK across to Belgium, up the coast, up through the Stanmast route through Holland. So there's an inland route that you go through Holland, through the canals with a sailboat with the mast still up, and popped out the top and went through the Kiel Canal, and we sailed around Denmark and Sweden and into Norway, and then back down again. And then in 2020, when the lockdown finally lifted on, I think it was about the 9th of July, we set sail. We did from Gosport down to the Scillies, the Isles of Scilly, 132 miles in 32 hours. And we had a couple of weeks in the Scillies, and a bit late in the season, but we said, well, why don't we tick the bucket list and go around the UK? So we sailed up the Irish Sea to Scotland, minced around the Western Isles for a bit, came through the Caledonian Canal, and then sailed back down the east coast back to Gosport.
Okay. Have you ever sailed across the Atlantic or anything?
No, not done the Atlantic. I've done the English Channel several dozen times.
Sure.
To France. And
much shorter distance.
Yeah, I mean, it's about 80 miles across.
Okay.
Lots and lots of sailing experience.
Yeah, you've done some amazing things so far, and obviously, what I'm hearing, it connects all of them, is that you've done it with the Army. Yeah. So if it wasn't for the Army, you probably wouldn't have had so many experiences. I mean, it's possible, but obviously, you're looking back at your life, you're like, okay, well, I can. No wonder why you had such a good time with your service.
Well, if I'd have been a civvy, I'd have had to work for a living, and that's not me.
Yeah, I hear you.
But early on, I got posted when we left Londonderry in 1982.
Okay.
I got posted away from the battalion, and I got posted to what was then called the Army Hang Gliding Centre, which later became the Joint Service Hang Gliding Centre. That was just being set up, and I had a job there as a clerk storeman, and I ended up. I arrived there and hadn't quite got the idea of what hang gliding was all about. And the guy that was setting it all up, this captain, he said to me, "Did I want to learn to hang glide?" I said, "What's hang gliding?" So within a week and a bit, I was on the first course, and I learned to hang glide, and I was out most weeks flying, and then about a year in, I took the exam to become an instructor, and then I finished off there doing 2 years of instructing and going out with teaching people to hang glide.
That's unbelievable.
Which was great fun. We went off on several expeditions as well. So we're taking guys that are qualified. We put an expedition together. We went to northern Italy. Flying the southern Dolomites, and we were based in American Air Force Base, actually, Aviano. So you may have heard of it, American Air Force Base Aviano in northern Italy. Yeah. We used to fly there. The following year, we went down to Spain, and we were flying some really challenging sites in Spain, really challenging takeoffs. Taken off at 4,500 feet above the valley floor.
Oh wow!
And the takeoff is almost vertical. You just step off on an updraft and you thermal around. I mean, the whole of the valley floor just lifts, and it's a spectacular place. So 4,500 feet sled ride down to a landing field, and then you come back up, and then you go off later in the afternoon when the whole valley lifts, and it's really pleasant just flying around. So that was a place called Azure in Spain. Yeah. We also took part in competitions, and we had several competitions that we took part in. And up in Scotland, we did some what they call dune bashing in the north of Scotland, and it's just dunes are about about 30 foot high, and you just scratch it along.
Oh, really? Okay.
Just looking out to sea, just beating up and down this ridge.
Sure. So where I'm living in the United States, we have Lake Michigan. I'm outside of Chicago, and so we have Lake Michigan there. There's sand dunes in Indiana and in the state of Michigan. And those are fun. They're about 30 feet in the air, sometimes a little higher, but you can just jump and roll on them. I never did any hang gliding, by them, but I see people with dune buggies and stuff like that. It looks like a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
So you're definitely one who loves extreme sports, which is great. And, with all those experiences, I'm sure you've met quite a lot of interesting people, obviously, with your podcast now called the Tim Heale podcast.
Yeah.
What are some of the, have you interviewing people you've already met? That you've done these experiences with, like friends of yours in the Army, or what are some of the stories that you've heard while you were podcasting?
Well, that's kind of how it started. When we went into the first lockdown, back in whenever it was, 2020. Was it 2020? I can't remember. It seems so long ago now. I got to thinking. I was doing ancestry, and I found my great granddad, who was a chief stoker in the Royal Navy, who lived over in Portsmouth, and he died in 1930. So I didn't have a time machine to go back and have a chat with him, but I thought, well, his story's lost. So if I don't tell mine, that'll be lost too. That's how I got into the podcast malarkey. So I did 24 half-an-hour episodes of my life. So if any of your listeners out there suffering from insomnia, have a go, have a listen, put you to sleep, possibly. Either that will give you nightmares and keep you up all night. And I got to the end of that. I did a couple of other episodes where I went slightly more in depth to some of the stuff I've done. And we're still in lockdown. I thought, what do I do next? So I started with other people. And I did my mother first. So I had a chat with my mum and got her story. And then it kind of moved on from there. And I was talking to people that I knew, friends and stuff like that, and that kind of dried up towards the back end of last year. Trying to cajole people and force them into talking to me and telling their stories, and so I went off and at the time I was playing about on Facebook and used to do what we call a Thirsty Thursday rant. So I'd sit there and go on about politics and stuff that was going on, and generally having a right old rant. And then I started doing that on the podcast. So
yeah.
I did a Thursday rant. And
well, it's funny because on Facebook, we all know we can get in trouble just ranting on social media, right? You never know who you're going to run into doing that, and who's going to be offended by doing that. And so I see what
banned a couple of times.
Well, if you haven't gotten banned on Facebook, then you're not doing it right. But so as far as podcasting goes, I agree with you. It's one thing to type words on a social media and to just rant, as you say, but when you're actually sitting down and having a conversation, I find it intriguing when you find somebody, even if you don't share a common interest, you can at least hash out a conversation and hopefully come to some kind of terms with each other where you're not end up hating each other because you're sitting down face to face. You're not just talking to an unknown bot, as it were.
Yeah.
And, so that's why I got into podcasting, because, I love meeting people who are just have great stories. Sometimes I have like-mindedness with them. And, like you and I, sir, the life you've lived and the life I've lived are nothing alike, but I really appreciate some of the stories you share with me. But,
well, we can talk politics if you want. I could go on about that all day long.
Well, I'm
not sure the bots would take it.
I had a conversation with a gentleman who was in Australia, and the latest political rant was all about COVID, and since then now it's like, okay, well, what do we talk about now? We talk about Russia and Ukraine, or the issue of the day here in America is the Supreme Court, getting rid of Roe v. Wade, and so I don't know how the conversations are overseas in other places, but what he told me is, hey, this is all part of Western civilization, so it's all part of the same conversation. So since you brought up politics, what's on your mind?
Well, Brexit mainly. It still hasn't been done.
Okay.
I mean, we're still pandering to the European Union.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love Europe. I've travelled extensively through Europe and always have done, probably always will do. But the European Union is a different barrel of monkeys altogether.
Okay.
They're just unelected bureaucrats that want a United States of Europe, which ain't going to happen, not with us anyway. But we've got the Northern Ireland Protocol. That has to go. I mean, that's just tying our hands and making life miserable for the poor buggers in Northern Ireland.
Sure.
Along with Article 16. And we've proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the EU have broken all the what's names that entitle us to pull the pin. And when we do that, what we should also do is tell them to stuff it and go full WTO rules with them. So World Trade Organization rules, the same way as we deal with anybody else in the world, and take the consequences, and we'll be much better off for it without them dictating to us.
Sure.
The other thing that they I don't know whether you saw it in America, but the other week they stopped a flight of illegal migrants being flown to Rwanda. Some unnamed bureaucrat in Strasbourg says that we couldn't fly this flight to Rwanda. And that's wrong. The European Convention on Human Rights is working against us. And that's something else we need to get shot of to be able to have we set up the human rights in the first place.
Yeah.
And now that's worked against us. So we need to get shot of that so we can then just concentrate on having our own set of human rights. I mean, the UK is renowned for being one of the best places for asylum seekers that are genuine.
I gotcha.
We're also saps to illegal migrants coming in here illegally. What they do is they throw away all their documentation and everything like that. And so we can't prove who they are. So my thinking is that if they come in on these boats without any documentation, coming into the country illegally, we should put them straight on a flight down to Rwanda and process them down there. Instead, what we do is we put them up in hotels. We give them an awful lot of money. It's costing the UK taxpayer £5 million a day to keep illegal migrants in this country.
Now, are the migrants, are they
How is that
mainly
right?
are they mainly refugees from the Middle Eastern wars, or
No,
no?
they are economic migrants coming from Central Africa,
From
or
Africa.
African countries, some of the Middle East countries, but they're certainly not asylum seekers. Asylum seekers, the proper ones, have the documentation and they're going through the proper process. The problem is that the genuine asylum seekers are being disadvantaged by so many illegals coming in.
Yeah.
And I've seen it firsthand. I've got friends that work for me in Afghanistan that missed the flights because the chaos that ensued in Kabul at the time. And they've lived in fear. They've managed to get out. They've got the right documentation. They've come through the right channels, and they've finally got here within the last few weeks. I mean, albeit they're fairly well traumatized from the experience that they've had in hiding for the last 6 months or so.
Yeah.
It's, the Taliban are actively seeking interpreters that work for foreign countries and organisations. What they're doing is they're finding these guys, and they've got all their DNA, all their biometrics from where they register to vote and all the rest of it. So once they find these guys, what they do, they take them into a market and make an example of them, whether they beat the crap out of them or whether they hang them in the market. And that's been happening.
Sure.
I feel sorry for the girls and the females in the country that have had 20 years of relative freedom, been able to go to school, get an education, and now it's all stopped. And they're forced back into the burqa. And you won't get any of them say that that they don't want to wear the burqa, because if they do, they're severely punished for it. And this is what's happening.
Sure. Well, one thing that I'm picking up from what you're laying down here, immigration, of course, is a hot debate topic here in the United States too. Different countries involved, obviously, but I think it comes back to an issue that you and I agree with. And you mentioned the European Union. And the reason why I think a lot of ordinary people, regular people, are opposed to that type of structure, especially in a country like Europe, or a continent like Europe, is that there's multi-countries there with different cultures, different traditions, different customs, religions even. And in the United States of America, that's absolutely true, just as much as it is in Europe. We just have 50 states, right? And so each state has its own tradition, its own culture, and people don't like when people come in and usurp the rules and the traditions and roles and things of that nature. And that's why it's such a hot topic. The problem is, like you said, there's bureaucrats not only in Europe but in the United States, and they want to make everything underneath one centralized platform, one legislative body, and that'll never work. I don't think that'll work in any place, because the cultural issues facing the world are very important, very personal, and you can't. It's not just about boundaries, but it's about let's try to legislate locally more than from a centralized location.
Yeah, I mean, we're not without problems in this country at the moment. When we got wee Jimmy Cranky up in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon wants an independent Scotland. The plain reality of it is that Scotland cannot afford to be an independent country. It just doesn't have the resource to be able to do it. We have something called the Barnett formula, which gives the Scots a massive, I'm not sure the exact amount of money, but it gives the Scots a lot more money per head than it does in England. The same for Wales and Northern Ireland under the Barnett formula. And the part of the country that's paying for it all is the southeast, which is the affluent part where London is, where more money is made. So from our point of view, from an English point of view, get rid of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. We'll just have an England.
Sure.
And we'll be much, much better off. But we're a United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And that's what it should be. But you've got these little factions that little Hitlers that want to rule the world, and they just haven't butted up against reality yet of the situation. They just haven't thought it through. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon just hasn't thought it through.
Gotcha.
And Alex Salmons before they're just crooks, really. I mean, there's £600,000 that's gone adrift, and they've had billions. It's like London. I mean, take London with the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. He's bankrupt. Transport for London keeps asking the government to bail him out. What's he do with it all? And the problem in London is that there's a massive problem with knife crime.
Okay.
And he's not tackling it. That's his job.
Is that because they outlawed possession of firearms in England?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you're not allowed to have handguns. You can have shotguns and the like. You can't certainly go up to the shop and buy an AR-15. That's all. You can't have an automatic weapon as a civilian in this country. But knife crime is rampant in London, particularly, and it all tends to be the young black kids that are stabbing each other on a daily basis. And the mayor of London should have that as his main project to stop, but he isn't. He's poking his nose in all other international matters rather than what he should be doing. And that's another thing that so wrong about Sadiq Khan. He just is useless at what he's supposed to be doing.
I could share the same sentiment about any politician here in the United States. One thing I'm curious about, though, because obviously the United States is notorious for going all over the world and trying to solve international problems. I wonder about the news outlets in the United States, because we have the BBC here in America, and I guess to a certain extent we're aware of some of the news that happens in the British Isles. Is there a lot of news broadcasts from the American perspective that you can see in your country?
Generally, we only get the negative stuff when you got kids run rampant in school, brassing up all their mates. That hits the headlines over here. Lots of stuff about poor old Sleepy Joe. Anytime he dozes off in front of a camera, that tends to make the news over here. Or if he does something stupid. There's not an awful lot about old Kamala Harris. She keeps a very low profile at the moment.
As she does here too. So
yeah, I mean, she's not as white as white, although she's black.
Come on now, color's not a thing anymore.
No, I didn't mean color. I mean, she's not as pure as driven snow, should we say?
I'm picking up what you're laying down there, Tim. So I appreciate it. Hey, well, we're coming upon an hour. I know we just kind of had a casual conversation here, but it was enjoyable talking with you. I want to give you the opportunity to not only plug anything that we haven't discussed and where people can find you, and give us sell your show a little bit there, Tim.
Oh, you want me to sell my show? Right. Okay. It's a Tim Heale podcast, Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories. I'm up to, I've just recorded episode 124 of Other People. And there was somewhere around about 200 episodes with my life and my rants and stuff like that. If you ever want a bit of a giggle, it's have a look at the podcast. They're on all the popular platforms. I'm also on YouTube, and YouTube, I've put an awful lot of content on there, particularly this year with the podcasts. I forget which episode I started out. It's about number 40, something like that. Going forward, are all on YouTube. I have a Thursday live stream that goes out every Thursday from 7 o'clock until 9 o'clock British summertime. So if you're around about, I think you're about 5 or 6 hours difference in America. But if you're around that sort of time, tune in. It's we have a laugh occasionally. We have some specials. I've done mental health specials, forces mental health special. I've done crime special. I've done sailing special. And then we generally have open forums where we have a chat about all manner of stuff. Right. And I have special guests come on, and people put stuff in the chat box and ask us questions. Put the panel on on task.
All right.
So,
well,
the standard answer is, well, if I don't know, what I'll do is I'll go away and I'll find out, and I'll get back to you.
Somebody will know, right? There you go.
Somebody will know, yeah. Either that or we'll just make up an answer.
Well, he is Tim Heale. He is a podcast host. He has led an extraordinary life, ranging from many things he's done in the military, and was an athlete and a podcaster and broadcaster and all around interesting guy. Tim, I want to thank you for appearing on this podcast. Obviously, I wish you the best of luck with your show and continuing to find interesting and ordinary people. You've lived a great life so far, and I wish you many more to come.
Thank you so much, Michael. I've enjoyed it.